Dragonball drip 24/7.
What's up, guys? We got another video here. This video is manga Super Saiyan Namek Goku versus King Cold is not close. Let's check this one out.
How strong was King Cold really? And how would he compare to Super Saiyan Goku that defeated Frieza on Namek? Today we're taking a closer look at Namek Super Saiyan Goku versus King Cold, breaking down what we know about Cold, where Goku stood after his transformation, and whether this matchup would have been competitive at all. Let's get into it. Starting with King Cold, the first hint we get about his power actually comes indirectly from Frieza during his fight with Goku on Namek. After Goku lands a brutal kick on him, Frieza comments that Goku is the first person to hurt him in that state since his parents. That line is important because it implies King Cold at minimum is strong enough to be relative to Frieza's suppressed final form. At that point in the fight, Frieza is battling Goku fairly evenly before using 50% of his power, which would place him somewhere around 3 to 4 million. That means King Cold should at least be capable of operating in that same general range, since Frieza specifically groups his parents alongside Goku as people capable of hurting him. We get more information when Frieza and King Cold arrive on Earth. When Krillin and Gohan sense the incoming ki, they immediately notice that Frieza is not alone. Krillin points out that the second energy feels very similar to Frieza's, and both of them are unbelievably massive. Later on, it's revealed that Mecha Frieza is actually suppressing himself. When Yamcha questions if Frieza's energy is really that huge, Gohan responds by saying that Frieza can become much stronger than what they're currently sensing. Even so, the suppressed energy Frieza is giving off is still enough to terrify fighters like Vegeta and Piccolo. Piccolo back on Namek was able to fight relatively evenly with second form Frieza, who had a power level of around 1 million. Vegeta by this point should also scale above that, since he could react to final form Frieza briefly in ways Piccolo could not. However, both of them still believe they have no chance against Frieza arriving on Earth. That would suggest that Frieza is still suppressing himself to a level similar to what he used on Namek in his final form, likely somewhere in the 3 to 4 million range. Since King Cold's energy is treated as being in the same ballpark, that gives him a very solid lower bound. However, it's also very likely that King Cold himself is suppressing his true power. The Daizenshuu states that even though King Cold is the head of the strongest family in the universe, he is still somewhat inferior to Frieza.
Damn. Yeah, I never thought that Frieza was weaker than his father. You know what I mean? I always thought that quite the opposite. I mean, and you see that in Dragon Ball a lot, actually, to believe it or not. You see that with Frieza and his father. You see that with Gohan and Goku in the Cell Saga, which, you know, he got surpassed. So you definitely see it in the series or whatever. It's actually quite prevalent. And so you even see it when, you know, King Piccolo and Piccolo Jr. Like you can go on and on and on. Even Trunks and technically Vegeta, if you looked at, you know, the Cell Saga as well. So it's very prevalent in Dragon Ball in the universe.
The wording is important because somewhat inferior implies the gap is there but not massive. Frieza's full power sits at 120 million, so King Cold at his best should logically be somewhere below that, but still in the same overall tier. This is also supported by how King Cold reacts after seeing future Trunks effortlessly kill Frieza. Rather than attacking immediately, he tries to manipulate Trunks and talk his way into gaining an advantage. The Daizenshuu also notes that once King Cold saw how easily Trunks defeated Frieza, he realized direct combat was not in his favor. So in terms of scaling, King Cold has two main interpretations. On the low end, he should be around 3 to 4 million at minimum based on Frieza's statement and how his energy is perceived on Earth, and on the high end, he should be somewhere below Frieza's full 120 million, but still relatively close, since the difference between them is only described as somewhat significant rather than overwhelming. Now, when talking about Namek era Goku, his strength is one of the easiest to pin down because the story gives very direct numbers for him. Before he even becomes a Super Saiyan, Goku is already strong enough to push Frieza harder than anyone else ever had. His base power is stated to be around 3 million after recovering from his injuries aboard the Ginyu Force ship. With Kaioken multiplied on top of that, his power rises dramatically.
You know, I had a question about that. How strong was Vegeta around that time when he thought he was a Super Saiyan? I'm curious to know that because I'm trying to figure out how far Vegeta was behind Goku in this timeline. So from the time that Goku comes with, you know, finally to meet Frieza, right when Vegeta was laid out, you know, dying, like how much of a gap was that? It had to be significant because Goku is base form and he's like going head to head with Frieza, right? They're almost neck and neck, and Vegeta couldn't do it. So I'm curious that if Vegeta were to get a sense of being there at that moment, as he was laying there choking on his own blood, dying. I wonder if he would, after eating that sensu bean, be strong enough to take on Frieza. Curious, man. You guys in the comments, let me know. I want to do a video on that. I'm curious about that.
At Kaioken times 20, Goku would reach around 60 million. That lines up with what we see in the fight because Goku at Kaioken times 20 is finally able to contend with roughly half of Frieza's maximum power. On top of that, attacks like the Kamehameha can amplify his output even further for short bursts, which is why his Kaioken times 20 is able to visibly pressure Frieza despite not being enough to win. Once Goku becomes a Super Saiyan, his power jumps enormously. Since Super Saiyan is generally treated as a 50 times increase over base, his 3 million power level would rise to 150 million. At that point, Goku is comfortably above Frieza when he's using only 50% of his power. Frieza at half strength would be around 60 million, so Super Saiyan Goku overwhelms him without much trouble. The fight only becomes close again once Frieza uses his full power at 120 million. Even then, Goku still has the advantage because 150 million is higher overall. As the battle continues, Frieza's stamina starts dropping because he cannot maintain his maximum output for very long. That's why Goku gradually pulls further and further ahead. By the end of the fight, Frieza's energy has fallen so much that he is no longer capable of seriously competing with Goku anymore. Now, when matching up King Cold against Namek era Goku, it's hard to see a realistic path to victory for King Cold. The main problem is simple. King Cold is stated to be somewhat inferior to Frieza, and Goku was ultimately able to defeat Frieza decisively on Namek. Super Saiyan Goku sits around 150 million, while Frieza at full power is around 120 million. Even at Frieza's maximum, Goku still had the advantage, and once Frieza's stamina started dropping, the gap became much larger. For King Cold to stand a real chance, he would have to make several assumptions in his favor. One possible argument is that the statement about him being somewhat inferior applies specifically to Mecha Frieza rather than Namek Frieza. Since Mega Frieza is stated to be even stronger than before, that could potentially place King Cold above Namek Frieza's 120 million while still keeping him below Mecha Frieza overall.
Yeah, that's crazy because, yeah, Mecha Frieza is supposed to be even stronger than that. So these power levels, man, they get out of hand and they get out of hand quickly, okay? And he was still handled accordingly in that we never got to see him really do anything in his form. But as a Frieza fan as well, guys, I mean, he's technically got the last laugh up to this point. If you keeping up with the manga at all, Frieza is still an ongoing character in this series. And I'm glad they kept him around. You know, he's got his forms and now, you know, Black Frieza is a problem. Okay, a real problem. So my question is, how are they going to deal with that? And Frieza, in my opinion, is one of the only characters that I don't ever think will join Goku, as all his other enemies became friends. Everybody, well, with the exception of Mercenary Tao, I think that was the only one, and General Blue, because General Blue got killed. I don't think they would have turned anyway. But starting with Tien and moving on down, I mean, most of those guys became friends, or at least became, you know, a Z warrior. So I don't see Frieza doing that, even though they fought together before. With Frieza, it was just, you know, a means to an end. That's all it was with Frieza. And that's kind of why I love Frieza, because he's one of the characters that just isn't going to do it. And Vegeta, I thought, you know, when I first met him, that he wasn't going to go, but that didn't happen.
However, that interpretation still has issues. Even if King Cold were somewhat above Namek Frieza, there is no evidence suggesting that he could reach a level so high that he would comfortably surpass Super Saiyan Goku. You would have to also assume that King Cold can use his full power far more efficiently than Frieza can. One of Frieza's biggest weaknesses on Namek is that he cannot contain 100% power for long because he's not used to fighting at that level. If King Cold could use his maximum strength without the same drawbacks, then that would help him quite a bit. But there's not much reason to think that that would be the case. King Cold likely spent most of his life in the same way Frieza did, relying on overwhelming power without needing to push himself to his limits very often. Yeah. There's no indication that King Cold trained extensively or conditioned himself to use his maximum power better than Frieza.
And that's what I loved about what they did with Frieza too, because what if somebody said, you know, okay, you are just gifted. That's all. You're gifted with these amazing abilities. But what if you used your gift and you actually took it upon yourself to train yourself? Then what? And that's what Frieza has done. And that's why Frieza is Black Frieza now. And he is so powerful. So that is a dangerous alien for somebody who's already gifted, but then wants to train on top of that. Like, I don't know how they're going to stop this guy. I really don't. It's going to be crazy. I mean, it's kind of like that Jiren thing as well. You know, Jiren was just a strong alien, just a fucking strong ass alien. And, you know, he used his own trauma to push himself to the limits. And, you know, he's not going to stop either. And I hope we see Jiren again. I really do that. And Dragon Ball Super, not to go on a side tangent, but that's my favorite character in the Dragon Ball Super. He was very simple, even his design. And he was just, like I said, a strong ass alien who just, this dude was just ungodly. So yeah, let's continue.
If anything, Frieza would probably be the more active and battle-tested of the two, considering that King Cold remains in the shadows as stated in his entry. Because of that, the most logical conclusion is that King Cold would simply lose to Goku in a similar way that Frieza did, if not worse. Since he is somewhat inferior to Frieza overall, he does not have a very clear win condition against a Super Saiyan Goku who is likely already strong enough to decisively overpower Frieza even at his peak. How strong?
Yeah, that's it. That is it, and that is all. Yeah, man. What do you guys think? I'm sure you don't think that King Cold can beat Goku at this time in this timeline. But maybe somebody out there does. If you do, you know, leave your comments down below. I would like to hear it. If you have any other theories, please let me know. I would like to know. And with that being said, guys, I will see you all in the next video.
If you want more content like this, hit the damn like and subscribe button then.